Good morning, good
Good
afternoon,
morning.
good evening, wherever you are. We have a very interesting topic today, and our topic's going to be the business and finance of cloud. So, most enterprises are at their crossroads on their cloud strategies, and there's massive upside. We all know that in utilizing public cloud services. But budgets are getting tighter, and the business case is getting important. And I think from a timing perspective, you couldn't be better with this webinar, with the markets being where they are. So we have a very interesting panel today, and we're going to be discussing how to build a business case to move to cloud. What are the strategies to responsibly scale to cloud adoption? And we're going to switch to new topics like how do you implement proper cloud FinOps controls and key decisions organizations need to make today for all of these topics. So if you were like me, you'd ask yourself, what are you going to get out of this webinar? I think you're going to get four things. The first is a big picture on the value of cloud transformation getting future ready. But more importantly, since we have practitioners today in our webinar, you're going to get actionable pointers to create a solid business case for cloud investments. You're also going to get practical insights into strategies to responsibly scale cloud at speed. And speed's important. We always have to mix strategy with operational effectiveness. And that's the fourth thing you're going to get as we move towards topics like FinOps. And that's why I'm so pleased today to have on our panel Nikhil Date. He's the Director, Engineering and App Services, Domestic and General. Hi, Nikhil.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Keith, who's the Global Head of Partner Sales for Microsoft and VMware workloads on AWS. He's signing in from Seattle, so the only one without sunshine. Keith, thanks for making it nevertheless.
Yes. Good morning. Happy to be here.
And last but not least, Milan, who's the corporate vice president, wears two hats, head of cloud and insurance at Hexaware. Milan, always good to meet you.
Same here. Happy to be here.
Brilliant. So I would say let's just jump in and get started. We have three lenses, as you can see in this webinar. So there's the enterprise view, the buy-side view, the hyperscaler view that's coming from Keith, and the implementation view, and that's coming from Millens. Let's start from the buy side, the enterprise side. And Nicola, I would start with the topic of business cases. So in your opinion, what's the right way to make a business case for cloud migrations and transformations? And what are the right outcomes to measure?
Now that's a great question, and something I'm passionate about, right? I think it's the first thing is to stop calling it that. I think it's because for finance people, if this looks like, oh, I want to go and just buy more technology, then it's not as interesting as, oh, actually I want to help us earn more money, or actually I want to give us operational new additional capability, right? So I think the real thing is about positioning this as a business transformation, which is what it really is, right? I mean, at least in my experience now, having done this a couple of times before, this is not just about tech modernization or about cost avoidance. I think that's a very narrow way to look at it. But I mean, speaking from experience again, and I think if you were to talk about the customer experience, how does this, in a business like ours, we are a multi-channel organization, phone, web, SMS, and the earlier systems that are there just can't provide the joined up view, right? Or if you have to talk about delivering at speed, because in today's world, everyone is a tech business, right? Everyone is a technology company, and newer, hungrier. I mean, we are a 110-year-old business, right? So everyone who is coming into the market wants to put us out of business, right? So they are moving at a pace which simply earlier systems will not let us move at. Then I think the other favorite analogy, I suppose, is entropy increases with time, right? I mean, the opportunity to simplify and the simplification, the benefits of simplification, which lead to more stable systems, much more robust, and the ability to sense what is happening. All of this, again, the old tech will not give you. And I think one of the topics that gets overlooked very frequently, I think, is skills availability, right?
Oh,
I mean, if you were to take a look at what people would have done on AS400, you don't have graduates coming out of college with brand new AS400 skills, right? I mean, that to acquire contemporary skills at a mid, what I would consider a mid market price point, is a huge benefit. And then a decision about buy versus build, right? Which is, I think, the age old question. We
yeah.
have chosen that anything which is our secret sauce, we want to build, but otherwise buy, right? I mean, and the buy thing makes sense because what you're buying is a product, right? Which means somebody cares about it, somebody keeps it evergreen, right? And you can really rely and depend on the product. I mean, it's like, even if you are an enthusiast, every time you want to go from point A to point B, you don't start with going and getting a kit car, right? You go to the car showroom and buy a product that someone knows and cares about. And then I think the ability to scale, and I don't mean from a tech point of view, right? I mean, cloud obviously gives you pretty much
Right.
infinite scale, right? But it's more about how can we launch new products? How can we go to new markets? How can we do more things without being constrained by having to buy more hardware or buy additional licenses? So I mean, the same old stuff, right? So it's in our case, I think we have really what we have found gave us the traction and really at the board level alignment that this is the right thing to do, is that we are moving with our customers, right? Customers are expecting compelling digital experiences, so this is the way we're going to give it for them, right? Not make this about cloud at all. I mean, it just becomes the vehicle to do it. And then that meant we had to become a product-led business ourselves. And we had to find partners, right, such as Hexaware, who had the similar mindset, AWS, who had a similar mindset that this is about enabling, right, enabling what businesses can do. And I think the only other thing I would say is, if you're talking about big monolithic implementations,
Mm.
don't try to make multi-million pound business cases, right? I mean, it's because I mean, the thing which you can see my passion, I think maybe a bit too much, but all forecasts are wrong, right? I mean, every single one. If you can predict the future, you are in the wrong business, right? And which means that making a business case for that last 2 to 3 years is just, I mean,
Yeah.
beyond stupidity, right? So plan for 3 months, see what you can do, test, learn, iterate, right? I mean, and then that essentially means that when you're going to pivot and you're going to change direction, and do not hesitate to change, right? I mean, absolutely don't get wedded to what you write on a piece of paper today, because as new data comes to light, as you hear more from your customers, just change, right? React. So that's me anyway. I mean, that's how I have gone about making the business cases that I have made for our cloud transformation, and we have a lot of that going on.
Nikhil, this is brilliant because just throwing a word like business case in a room suddenly takes the mind towards cost avoidance. And I get that.
Yeah.
And I love the way you just said, okay, this is not about cost avoidance. It's about so much more.
Yeah.
And I also love the way that for almost 7 minutes, you never use the word cloud.
Yeah.
Right? You never used the word cloud, but you gave us a lot of guidance. And it was you saying it's about joining the dots. You might be starting with customer experience. You might also be starting with buy versus build, and then buy is okay for context, but when you build for core, where do you build it on? And if you chunk it up, not just in terms of business case, but also in architecture, you're building on the cloud. So this is really good. And Milan, I guess you're left with the receiving end of all of this on the implementation side. How do you see this, Milan?
No, so I quite agree with everything Nikhil said. I'll just add a couple of dimensions that might be helpful, specifically since the question was how do you convince the C-suite that this is the right thing to do and this is the right time to do it. One of the things that we have seen really gets executive attention is benchmarking with your peers, right? whoever those peers are, not necessarily in the same industry. If you're benchmarking with, let's say, a technology company, which is the case actually in domestic and general's case, right? You are not just thinking about traditional competitors, but you're also thinking about, the companies, the technology companies that are providing similar services. And whether it is Hexaware, whether it is ISG, whether it is AWS, we can help with that. And I think that's sometimes I have seen customers get into this rut of trying to do very detailed assessments before really showing the big picture. So I would actually put a caveat that, before you get into the weeds, try and put a high level benchmark and say whether you're a laggard or whether there are certain things that you can do to really build competitive advantage. So that's one thing that I would add in addition to what Nikhil said. And the second thing is, I would actually underscore the last point that Nikhil made. I have seen a lot of organizations making commitments like, we will have so much percentage of workloads on the cloud by so and so time frame, and that sort of becomes the measuring criteria and not the underlying business value. And that there they end up making the wrong decisions, because the metric now is just, hey, how many workloads can I put on the cloud? Whether I'm putting the right workload or not, that nobody cares about, and that can prove very expensive later on. So yeah, I would actually say, think of smaller time frames, smaller outcomes, and continue to improvise. I mean, AWS launches, I don't know, several dozen services every month, right? Several services every year. If you make long-term commitments to something that exists today, you are not in a position to leverage something better, far better, that's going to come down just 4 weeks from now. It's like buying iPhone 13 in September, which I did.
So I love that analogy of iPhone 13 in September. Nikhil, if I were a CIO and I had a large monolith application, just like the one you spoke about, and I'm under this pressure for modernizing this legacy app, and everybody's telling me, well, it's all about saving money, and the question I would get from the board is, hey, on what timeline can you achieve a favorable ROI? What would your advice be for someone like me?
Now that's that's another great question, right? So I think when the board is always right, so but you can help them. I think in this case, I think how you measure ROI becomes a crucial thing, right? Because in our experience, one of the interesting changes in mix that happens when you move, when you transform applications to the cloud, is really the mix of how you spend money on the application changes, right? So, I mean, from a finance lens, there is obviously the switch from capex to opex, because earlier you used to buy a server and depreciate it over God knows how many years. But the second thing really is from a technology point of view, the big separation between build and run, right? And one of the changes, one of the big advantages that happens is, as you move into a product-led mindset, and as you move your applications into the cloud, you will find that the amount of money you spend on building new stuff goes up as a percentage, as opposed to run. Because I think traditional applications, you spend a lot of money on the run. I mean, really, to keep the lights on is a big thing, right? So I think from that point of view, and I have several examples that we can go into if you wish, but definitely I would say for ROI, do not talk about lifting and shifting workloads to the cloud, right? We are doing that as an absolute last resort, and I'll tell you where the last resort comes in, right? Where there is not much value in migrating historical data, but the application is mothballed, absolutely lift and shift those workloads, but at every other opportunity, transform them, right? At the minimum, refactor the code you're using to drive simplification, and definitely reduce the reliance on individuals who are who are the orchestrators, because that's the other thing, right? I think the direct costs of an application are often very visible, but the indirect costs, right? I mean, there is a whole, I don't know. I mean, maybe some people will call it a cottage industry. Some people would call it orchestrators, enablers, whatever. But there is a whole, cohort of people who are facilitators and the go-betweeners between the build and the run teams. But you can
Mm,
eliminate that boundary, right? Which means all of that is cost that you save. So don't. All I'm saying is, don't look for my application depreciation x dollars and look for the x dollars, right? Look for the blast radius,
mm,
everything the application relies on to keep going. And then in the new world it would be very different, right? I mean, it is it is, I think, from a mindset point of view, it's like all of the existing furniture might not go into a shiny new house. It's the same, right? Don't try to take everything that you do today and try to fit it to the cloud from an ROI point of view. But there is a way to make that to make that case. And equally, because your spend on the build goes up, your the upside potential goes up for that,
yeah.
right? So, this is not just about a cost saving exercise anymore. And again, from experience, I think if you can retrain your teams, you get newer skills of people who understand your context, which often is king at a lower price point than just going and
Mm.
having to acquire a shiny new skill, right? So I think it's, I mean, there's so many tricks, right? If you want to make numbers on a spreadsheet match up, that's the easiest thing to do, honestly. But I think it's all I'm saying is, look broad, go broad, make sure that you are taking into account all the hidden costs that are there in an enterprise, that go into that reflect the true cost of ownership, as it were. And then you will find that it's very easy to make the case. It's not hard at all.
And Nikhil, this is what I love about a conversation like this with real practitioners, right? The answers and the responses you get are often counterintuitive. Like, I'm going to take with me, for example, lift and shift is almost your last resort, right? Why take the old furniture into a new shiny house, right? So it's very counterintuitive thinking for someone who's just read about cloud. And I don't know what's going on in your mind, Keith. In my mind, it's like, okay, well, that's if that's the case, then this is how the world should translate this into patterns and lessons learned. But Keith, I'd love to hear your opinion on the
Yeah,
dialogue you've been hearing for the last 15 minutes.
yeah, no, I love the insights from Nikhil. And look, we have seen thousands and thousands of enterprise migrations at AWS. We have a lot of data, and a couple of points I want to share and just echo what Nikhil has said. So we have something called the Cloud Value Framework, and this is a prescriptive methodology with 4 pillars to build the business case to the cloud, and it hits on things that and Nikhil talked about. So we look at cost savings, of course, but more importantly, we look at staff productivity. What is the function by task, what people will do? We look at operational resilience. What's the benefit of improving SLAs and reducing unplanned downtime? Looking
Mm,
at critical workloads and how they're deployed. We look at business agility. How can you deploy new features faster? How to reduce errors in your application? How to improve your application pipelines? And so that you can launch new services faster. And in fact, the 4 pillars of this methodology, when we look at it, cost savings is actually the smallest part of the business value.
mm,
47% of the business value is from increased business agility, like launching applications faster. And 32% is from staff productivity, and 13% is from improved operational resilience. So we have this methodology of building a business case that goes through these pillars that really addresses what Nikhil said in a programmatic, systematic way that gives a real clear roadmap to customers on how to think about how do I determine the value I'm going to get from the cloud. So you can work with Hexaware and AWS to sort of build this. And then the second thing I'll say is we have another program called the Migration Acceleration Program. And this has been recognized as one of the most as one of the Gartner's recognized one of the best cloud migration programs. And it's a prescriptive guidance on how to think about moving to the cloud. And we think about it in 3 different phases. assess phase, a mobilize phase, and a migrate phase. And the assess phase is about building that business case, understanding and blueprinting your current environment. And then in the mobilize phase, we're doing all of the planning and all the setup, and we're doing things like assessing the your employees' capability and cloud knowledge, and what are the training gaps, and what's their operational readiness before we actually go into these waves of migration. And a partner like Hexaware is really, they understand this process very well. And in fact, when customers use our partners to do the map migrations, they have significantly better outcomes. They move faster. They don't land in these what we call stalled migrations. This is often happens, and we have really interesting data around customers who use our map program
Mhm.
experience a 1.5x higher cost savings, 5x higher staff savings, and 4.3x higher business agility because of this process that we go through. And so, again, proven methodology, it works. We've seen it time and time again. And when you take a methodical approach to this, we just see better outcomes. Customers move faster, and you're able to go back to the board with a faster ROI decision and better results over time.
And this is brilliant, Keith. And by the way, I'm making furious notes as you speak. And I love the way you put together things in a framework, a value framework. You've chosen the word value instead of ROI. Again, an indication of where our attention should be. And also with migration acceleration, I think the good thing you have, Keith, is you have a very unique vantage point. So many system integrators are implementing on AWS, so many kinds of clients, everybody from cars to insurances on AWS. Given that you have that and you have brought all these insights into frameworks, if if you had one ask some advice for enterprises on how to better partner with AWS to enhance the value they're getting from cloud and actually get the insights that you just mentioned. You just threw so many factoids into this webinar. How, what do you wish they did more?
Yeah, so a couple things I would say. First of all, it's important not to get into analysis paralysis.
Mm,
It's absolutely imperative to move fast. And and don't focus on trying to move everything all at once. I think Nikhil mentioned this and then Milan mentioned this, like take areas where you can move quickly, pilot, experiment. It's really important to move fast, do experimentation, iterate, and move on it. Don't spend a bunch of time trying to say we're going to get all of our cloud workloads into the cloud by this date. By that's just it doesn't work that way. So
mm,
look at your business, identify what's highest priority, where's your pain, where can you get really quick value. And so we have some tools like through our assessment phase we can help identify what is the stuff that's really hard to move and what's the stuff that's easy to move all the easy stuff first, move it fast, move it now, optimize it on the cloud, and then start to prioritize what's the harder stuff and build a plan, get the teams organized, and then iterate and experiment to sort of move fast. So my first advice is you got to move quickly and get started and experiment and iterate. And you really have to be honest about your skills assessment. I think Nikhil mentioned this. It's a very clear shortage of talent. And you got to invest in upskilling your people. I mean, we're seeing people want to do more high valued skills on the cloud. And some people are afraid the cloud, I'm going to lose my job. So they got to get over that bubble that I'm going to lose my job because of the cloud. But it's about learning agility and saying I've got to go learn this new technology stack, and their skills are going to become more valuable. So I think IT leaders need to position cloud training and cloud skills as mandatory, and they got to say what skills does that organization need, and then put their people through the appropriate training. And we have lots of training. We have partners that can help train your employees. But this upskilling of talent is super critical. And you're not going to lose your job. There's plenty of work to be had, and it's going to be more interesting work.
what do you feel, Nikhil?
No,
hearing what Keith says, because you're probably on the other side of this question.
No, I agree 100%, right? And I think I think that is where actually it does take, in a sense, three to tango, right? And the integrator or Hexaware has a massive role to play, because I think the way we are approaching this, we can have what I would call a more fluid deployment of talent depending on where the needs are, right? And that way you don't feel compelled to hire for everything, and you are not compelled to outsource for everything either, right? You can, and I think that, by the way, is a big thing. I would strongly, and we are very delighted with our choice of partners here, right? And Hexaware, AWS both work very closely with us. I think the thing to say here is, do not look to outsource, right? I mean, it has to feel like one big extended team, because then that's when the going gets rough, you find that the dynamism in the entire team can be brought to bear. Because if it's an arm's length relationship, that is not a recipe for change. That's a recipe for managing by contract, and that is not only hard work. It is just something that is not designed to react fast to competitive pressures. So I think it's really about keeping aligned on the goal, and really working together and collaborating as closely as possible. But it's a I completely hear what Keith said, right? I think there can be a lot of fear
Mm.
in the teams with the change, because and I think the way I position this to my team, right, again, is change is fun when you are doing it, right? It's not fun at all if it's happening to you. So from that point of view, if they can lean in and help us make the change, then it's a win-win, right? And it's a win for the organization, because these are people who understand our business. You can't buy that skill, right? So
Mm.
tech skills you can learn, that's for sure.
No, great
That's
points, Nikhil.
yeah.
And I like the way you said it's a partnership and we should not manage by contract. It reminds me of anecdotes that we hear mostly on our side of the table, Keith, and it's mostly struggling with overcommitting and undercommitting to enterprise agreements. Talking about contracts. Do you have some guidance, Keith, for firms like domestic in general, and not just Nickel, but the broader community, for how to choose the right committed spend level, and how can they make sure they track towards these targets? Because that's the economic side of this equation.
Yeah, let me just start with a couple of things. The first is it's important to note for customers that are not on the cloud today, AWS offers pay-as-you-go approach for pricing. For the vast majority of our cloud service, you only pay for individual services you need for as long as you need them, without any contracts. There's no termination fees, and even within that, you can buy things like reserved instances and savings plan. Now, for customers who have enterprise EDPs with us and our enterprise agreements, and traditionally that starts at $1 million for customers that aren't aware of that. But as you think about managing that enterprise agreement, when you've got $1 million of cloud spend or more going, there's a bunch of really important best practices that we recommend. And the first is implementing cloud financial management. And this is really what you need to do, is dedicate resources to this domain area and build a center of excellence. And this may be new because managing costs in the cloud is different than managing on-prem. And you need to adopt a consumption model based on actual usage, not on some elaborate
Mm.
forecast. And then you need to measure the overall efficiency of the workloads and the cost associated with delivering it. So having governance and key measures
Yep.
is really important. And then analyzing and attributing your expenditures. Because in the cloud, it's easy to identify costs and the cost of systems, and it allows transparency to IT to assign and attribute those costs to individual workload owners. That helps you measure your ROI. And AWS has just lots and lots of tools to help customers analyze these costs. I mean, things like our billing conductor and cost
Mm.
explorer and AWS budgets. And you can work with partners like a Hexaware who can help understand the various AWS services that do all of this. But managing cloud costs is, again, I would go back to these four pillars that we talk about. implementing financial management, moving to consumption, and implementing a set of key measures.
Well, that's really good, Keith. And we are on a live webinar here, which means we're getting questions, and you can see already our conversations generating some questions as we started bringing finance into the equation. And the question we're getting is, how do you, or of as a finance team, think of trading capex for opex? So cloud migrations are moving heavy capex to higher opex, but in the current market, some businesses are averse to ever increasing opex. Nikhil, I guess you might have a view on this, and or especially the financial teams that you have to deal with as you make your case.
Correct. I mean, um, and this is this is a great point, right? Because we had to face into that, at the point we started, and I think the what I would say, to the individual that asked this question is, make a partner of your CEO, right? More than the CFO, because what I guarantee is that the CEO does not care whether it's capex or opex. They care about cash, right? And if the total cost of ownership is what is the defining factor for the capability that you get, then this does become a non-issue, right? And I think we have a hugely supportive CFO, right, to be fair. So but equally, I think it is important to not be parochial almost about financial treatment of this, right? And take a look at the cash position. How much, where is more cash being spent by the business, and for the capability you get, how much money are you spending, right? That is the equation that matters, not whether you call it capex or opex. Yeah.
No, good point, Nikhil. And Milan, I love
Yeah,
spending time with you because every time we meet up, you always have a unique vantage point. It's just because the number of clients you see, the kind of clients you see, you must be seeing, handling this question so many times from so many clients. You must have a
absolutely.
unique angle.
So yeah, I get this question all the time. So first of all, at least in the US, the regulation is catching up with technology. So FASB came up with new guidelines in 2018, where a lot of cloud costs can be capitalized, right? So it's not that everything has to be OPEX. So that's one thing, and I'm happy to share more details for those who are interested. But I think the bigger point is that, you know, when you think about adopting cloud, a lot of times, like Nikhil said, organizations take a very narrow view of what the real costs are, right? So, yes, you are moving certain expenses from capex to opex. And yes, your opex will become much higher if you take the old habits and old operating models to the cloud. And that's where the question of talent, the question of automation, the question of processes comes in. Our experience has been that, yes, you are moving some spend from capex to opex, but you're significantly reducing opex. I mean, think of the savings you will make in licensing, right? The annual maintenance that you pay for licenses, that's all opex. Think of all the savings that you will have in the reduced spend on administration, EBAs, patching, etc. And more often than not, and we do this, the cloud adoption, cloud value assessment along with AWS all the time. More often than not, when you look at the full picture, your costs actually come up significantly lower. I don't know, Keith, if you have a different view or you want to add anything else to it.
Yeah, no, I think I love what Nikhil said about be friends with the CEO because he doesn't care. I totally agree with that point of view. I think if you look at sort of the traditional IT purchasing, right, 3-year cycle, I buy a bunch of hardware, I got to amortize it. All of that goes away when you start to move stuff to the cloud, right? I mean, so you can really change your cash flow patterns. You can really, if I look at, we see customers with very large test and dev environments. In the old days, you had to spin up a bunch of hardware to do that. In the new days, you turn on the testing environment, you shut it down. And so just that flexibility moving to OpEx has so many sort of non-cash benefits, so to speak, right? You think about the business agility that results from it. So I think You're right, Milan, about not being so narrowly focused. It's like, what are the other benefits we're going to get by moving to the OpEx model? And there may be non-cash benefits that need to be considered in business agility and performance and that sort of thing. So I think it's taking a broader view of this as you think about the cloud, because it really changes everything, or has the potential to change everything for you in a good way.
Milan, if given all that you're seeing in the market, is there a way, or has Hexaware and your team found ways to help self-fund cloud transformations? Because I think going into the next few quarters, there's going to be blood on the streets. But ambitions don't stop. I mean, things still need to happen. Maybe funding is dried up, or it's at least become trickier. Do you have ways, means, methods of bringing all that we have spoken for the last half an hour? Have you put this into a playbook? I'm sure you already have. So, would love some
Uh,
guidance and thoughts.
great question, and I will give you some examples, which quite honestly might actually surprise the audience, right? In terms of how, and I love what Keith said, that a lot of organizations get into this analysis paralysis where they do analysis for a long time, rather than showing quick wins and iterating and pivoting as they go forward. But I call this, if you have to really adopt cloud with velocity, uh, I always recommend to our clients taking what I call the path of minimum viable resistance. And I think of three very low hanging fruits that I would encourage every organization to look at. Right. So the first one is, in your data centers, most of the money that is being spent is on compute, storage, and network. Right. If you just think of storage, and if you just think of migrating data from your data centers, just do data migration, right? Or essentially just move storage to the cloud. In one of our customers, we helped them move about 800 terabytes of data. They were able to decommission about 24 storage area networks. And as the storage area networks went away, the backup for that storage went away. And you were able to find a house with much cheaper backup. Just that act saved them several $1 million. And all of that money is now available to fund other change initiatives that you want.
Mm,
Right? So that's one. The second is, if you think about the last decade, spinning up VMs was so easy. There was always, room to spin up a new VM without spending a single dollar of capex. And that has led to such a big VM sprawl that today organizations have many more VMs than they are using. A lot of customers, and this is what I meant by it'll surprise you, a lot of customers, we are seeing that you can actually decommission 70 to 80% of the VMs that you have on prem and only move 20%. Guess what? If you move the entire 100%, first of all, you will never get the permission to move it. And second, it is never going to make the business case. But 70 to 80%, we've seen customers just turn off the spigot. And again, all of that money is now available because remember, that was already in your budget. So this is not new money. So this is what will actually self-fund. The third piece that I'm going to talk about, which is what Nikhil said. Once you get this money out of storage and from compute, honestly, by right sizing compute and by just moving storage to the cloud, you now have the money to use automated tools, best practices from Hexaware, from AWS, to actually make the right decisions, right? Refactor your code, put infrastructure as a code first, right?
mm, mm.
Put the right instrumentation for monitoring so that you don't end up, overspending on the cloud.
Yeah.
So that's sort of our three-step approach to self-funding cloud, right? Move storage, rationalize it, rationalize right-size compute, move it, all of that money that comes out of it, use it to refactor, but use automation heavily. So I don't know if it makes sense.
No, this is
You're,
great.
I would
Go ahead.
love to add, you're hitting something that's near and dear to my heart, Milan. And I want to bring up a difficult topic, which is Microsoft licensing. This is front and center of my world. We have thousands and thousands of customers that are migrating Microsoft workloads to AWS, and their licensing position is always an issue they have to deal with. And we have multiple licensing models. But let me give you some data points. We've done over 1,000 assessments in the last 12 months with customers, and the average customer is seeing a 37% cost savings on AWS through licensing consolidation on AWS. So big cost savings. This becomes an important funding model. Here's the other thing we've found. We've seen a 49% savings on SQL licensing when they come to AWS because we're able to consolidate databases, consolidate instances, and optimize from enterprise to standard, which significantly reduces costs. So there's a really important licensing strategy on AWS. And then more importantly, we actually have a pathway to actually get you off Microsoft licensing. You could refactor SQL Server to Aurora or Postgres for 1/10 the cost. You can take a .NET application, move it to .NET Core on Linux servers or containers, removing that Windows Server cost. You're saving 25% of the cost of that application. And that will help fund modernization down the road. So we have a lot of strategies to help customers optimize this legacy Microsoft licensing position, working through partners like Hexaware that can help. And it's shocking how expensive that licensing is. And when you can get to cloud native, it's a tremendous savings. And by the way, then you get all the benefits of cloud native application, all the services available, things of that nature. So I had to throw that out there. It's a really
No, I would just say that
but they run well on AWS.
the optimization and licensing assessment that we run all the time along with AWS, it's a AWS methodology. Microsoft is one piece of it. It's a huge piece of it, but software licensing, looking at that again, can be a big lever that's available to you to self-fund your cloud transformation. And AWS has a very, very prescriptive and a very predictable methodology, which is called OLA, or Optimization and Licensing Assessment, that can give you exactly how much and by when can you drive out, honestly, from your costs.
Folks, we're getting another question from our audience here on industry clouds, whether we as a team have a view on it. Vilan, why don't you start with this?
Yeah, I mean, like any other technology evolution, it is inevitable that for us to continue to drive value for customers, we will have to think about clouds in context of specific industries. I know all hyperscalers are taking steps towards coming up with their own either industry clouds or industry capabilities. So, I think, over a period of time, as the industry matures, we will see, at least for the big industries, manufacturing, retail, financial services, healthcare, I honestly think that there will be dedicated industry clouds that will be available from the hyperscalers themselves. And service providers like us have already built blueprints through all of the experiences that we have with our customers, like domestic and general. Those blueprints help us, replicate all of the things that are required in a specific industry and sort of reduce the time to value for our customers. But I think industry clouds in some shape or form are already there, but I only see a lot more investments going into it because, today, a lot of the growth is driven by infrastructure as a service, right? As platform as a service capabilities, as the data and AI capabilities become more and more pervasive, customers and hyperscalers will essentially look at industry-specific use cases. So that's my view.
Nikhil, you're on the receiving end, I guess, of an industry cloud. So any guidance on how does one plan for this, and where is it on the horizon?
See, I think from my point of view, it would be great if we can sort of guarantee regulatory compliance and so on and so forth, right? Because that would be the main lever from our point of view for using for using the industry cloud. So far, actually, given what we know and given the flexibility that we want to aim for in terms of the markets we want to target, and where we want to go, and data protection, data domicile, and all those other considerations, if the cloud could actually cater for all of that, that would be brilliant, right? I mean, and why not? So I think there is definitely, I think, there would be takers for things like that. But it also, we are trying very hard to be use case driven, right, in all of this, to keep focusing on what is it that we are trying to do, and then decide the application and the underlying technology completely depending on the use case. So whether we go SaaS, whether we go cloud, or some other solution, right? Buy versus build. So that's where we are anyway right now.
Keith, anything you can tell us without probably, or at least revealing what you can of what the future looks like in this space?
Yeah, I think we're all trying to determine, how much of this is hype and how much of this is real. And what I mean by that is our focus, first of all, we have over 200 services in production globally, more than any other cloud provider, 48% more than Azure, 84% more than Oracle. So we have more services in production globally. We have the largest global footprint of infrastructure with availability zones across all the world markets. We continue to invest in more data centers coming online. So in our lens is we want to make the most services available to the most regions anywhere in the world. And whether you're a manufacturer or healthcare company, you need DevOps pipelines. So I think there's a question of what's really differentiated about these industry clouds, because you need infrastructure, you need compute, you need networking, you need storage. And if you look at certifications, I see a question around, how do we ensure relevancy for industry? Now, we continue to earn industry certifications for security and specializations. We have more than any other cloud provider today. We have all the ISO, PCI compliance. So we're going to continue to invest in industry compliance, security certifications, as we have been. And I think as we see customer demand evolve, as we always say, 90% of our roadmap is from customer demand. Customers demand it, we're going to build it. And so we'll continue to monitor the market, but right now we're focused on expanding our footprint. And we have a bunch of new data centers planned to open around the world, increasing availability of services in all the geos of the world. We're currently the market leader, all of those, and we're going to continue to do so.
Yeah, that's great, Keith. Milan, I'm just trying to imagine what life feels like when I'm sitting in your chair. You're hearing all of this and you're saying, okay, everybody's testing the market. Nikhil's saying, well, it's useful only if you're left, and Nikhil's also probably telling you, well, this is the budget I have, but chunk it out. And what does life feel like in your chair, Milan? And you're left with implementing all of this. You're trying to bring out what AWS has. You're trying to give Nikhil what he wants. What does life feel like? And maybe as a second step to that, any advice for the other side of the equation?
Yeah, life is exciting to say the least, in a good sense. Uh, I'll just say a couple of things that have worked well for us, and I would say that should be those should be the approaches that they should take as you're helping customers navigate this relatively complex journey of digital transformation. Cloud is an aspect of it. The first is it is absolutely important to understand the outcome that they are trying to drive and not just get focused on the activities. It is very easy to become an order taker and just be focused on activities. And I think that's the first thing that I encourage our customers and our teams to say, that we have to be absolutely on the same page on what the goalpost is, rather than thinking about formations, using a soccer terminology, or a football terminology. So that's the most important thing. Sometimes even customers don't have clarity of what they're trying to drive towards, and that's the role that we end up playing, and I think that's our duty to play that role, to make sure that if the customer has clarity, we understand it. But if the customer doesn't have clarity, we help them achieve that clarity before we start doing a bunch of activities. So that's rule number one. The second rule is it's important not to just do what we think the customer wants us to do, but what we think is the right thing for the customer to do.
Mm, mm,
And it's not always easy. It's you have to, obviously they are your customers, so you have to make sure that you are doing it in the right way. But I think, again, as a service provider, it is important for us to make sure that we guide them towards the right decisions, not just what we think they want us to do. And finally, it is absolutely essential for us to be in lockstep with our partners, AWS or any other hyperscaler that we're working with, to make sure that, the pace of innovation that, AWS is driving is just breakneck. And, I'll give you an example. Every organization uses, if they're an AWS customer, they use S3. AWS has 300 instances of just compute, right? It is very easy to choose the wrong instance type, the wrong instance family, the wrong tiering. And you have to make these decisions on a daily, hourly basis, right? So you have to make sure that you are using the right tools that are available from AWS, like S3 intelligent tiering or whatever, right? And that's why it is absolutely essential that we maintain a transparent relationship as we are working on delivering these transformation for customers. When we're working with the DNG, we are working with AWS, and we're working with several other partners. Always trying to make sure that the best of what is out there is being leveraged, rather than just committing to what we think is here and now, and not keeping ourselves focused. Those are, I would say, the three things that are the most important from my perspective.
thanks,
And if I
Milan.
could echo one thing, Prashant, which is don't go it alone. Like what I see is the customers who just try and go figure it out with their existing teams just struggle. So partnering with someone like a Hexaware or multiple partners is so critical. I mean, if you think about, I always think of this analogy of driving a Ferrari. I'd like a Ferrari. I'm not sure I know how to drive a Ferrari. So if you're new to AWS, you may not know how to run the console and all that experience, and working with a partner to actually manage that environment for you. Yeah, certainly in the beginning and or over time, and upskilling your team is so critical. It's such a critical success factor as using a partner to manage your environment over the long term. Don't go it alone. That's our advice from an AWS lens.
Absolutely, and I think to add to that, if I may, I think would you hire an enthusiast to build your house, right? Or would you hire a practitioner to do it? I think that is really the distinction here, right? I think it's about whether you're bringing in practitioners to accelerate your learning curve. You absolutely need to create a center of capability excellence internally, but don't think you have to attend right from kindergarten and all through college and undergrad and postgrad to get to the PhD. Right, bring in a practitioner to help you, and that accelerates. These are absolutely things that that we must do. This is not about losing self-reliance, which is a easy fallacy. I think it's really about being smart about what are the things you need to know, because and going and getting what you need. I think, yeah.
Nikhil, could you take another angle on this? Because I think what's coming out here is not a one-time transformation, but almost a continuum in transformation. So the other side of that is a continuum in cloud costs. And I guess you're left holding that. In any advice on how to control continuing cloud costs?
So yes, I think the one thing is stay aware of them, right? I think one of the biggest mistakes that builds bad habits is to use another analogy, if as a child you don't get pocket money, but you have a charge card given by your parents, you never know what your lifestyle costs, right? So, but if on the other hand, you are being held accountable for a certain spend, and as a workload owner and as an application owner, as a product owner, if you are being told this is the value you are delivering and this is the cost you are incurring month on month, it's very easy to tune your behavior to to write right size the cost. And some of this is just being smart about the workloads, right? I mean, I think Milan and Keith have already touched on these things. But test environments, why do they have to run overnight? Why are they even running overnight? And the instant people look at this, I mean, it's like every time you have to tighten the belt a little bit at home, right? I mean, you find very innovative, creative ways to deal with, cutting the, designing your clothing basis the amount of cloth you have. And you can keep the lights on, you can deliver business results and still be smart with the cost you have, right? But I think it's being aware of them. And I think one of the key things is, hence, don't depend on some team out there to tell you how much, what is the, what are the costs you're incurring, and only look at them, once a month, right? I mean, definitely govern them once a month, but be aware of them almost daily, and encourage your product owners and product managers to stay on top of those.
Great, Nikhil. We unfortunately coming to the last 5 minutes of our webinar, and I'm seeing so many questions from the audience on multi-cloud, etc. I wish we had time to handle those questions, but please feel free to take these to Keith, Milan, and Nikhil offline. I'll bring us to a closing question. I want to base it on what you said, Nikhil and Keith, and that is, don't go it alone. Don't go it alone. And so I'll start with you, Nikhil, and I'd love each of your responses on the same question. What does a successful SI AWS client relationship look like, and what should make it work? What are the key tenets to this troika? Nikhil, maybe let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, from my point of view, make sure that we speak regularly, right? And really, try and dispel the notion of a boundary here. I mean, sure, everyone is looking for their own win. Everyone is looking for their own organization's interest, and that is all fair play, right? But I think so the way I look at it is, if we don't make money, if we are not successful, then nobody is successful, right? There is no outcome here where only one party ends up being successful in this. So trust that, right? I think it trusts that, and absolutely own what success looks like for your business. Because Milan wouldn't know what success looks like for D&G, and neither would Keith. They are enablers. They can help you. They can help you accelerate the journey, but own that success, right? And share that, right? I think definitely don't keep it to yourself. Make the partners, true partners, right? Bring them close, keep them close, and really work closely with them. That would be my our strategy anyway.
Got it, Nikhil. Keith, what about you? What do you feel?
Yeah, look, my job and what we're trying to do from AWS Lens is we want to inform partners like Hexaware on what are the market opportunities and trends we see. We want to educate Hexaware on new services, technology approaches, pathways, business value, and then enable their teams so they can go deliver value to customers. So, our job is to help partners like Hexaware be really, really good at AWS, so that when they're working with Nikhil, they have the support, education, training to really deliver outstanding outcomes for customers. So that's in my side of the equation, where I'm primarily focused on working with partners. But we want to build the most world-class partners in the world to serve customers and deploy deploy AWS workloads to the cloud, so that Nikhil can feel confident. I got someone a practitioner. I love how he said that. A practitioner that knows what they're doing. So our job is to build practitioners on the AWS side.
Lovely, Keith. Milan?
I don't have much to add over whatever Nikhil and Keith said. So I'll give you the couple of minutes back, Prashant, to make any closing comments. But I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks.
Closing comments.
Thanks, Milan. I mean, I had the easy job here. I just had to ask questions, and I made furious notes. So I hope everybody else in the audience has made furious notes. I came in with maybe a simplistic question to our audience here, and I said, okay, how do we avoid costs, and how do we business case ROI? And oh my God, the discussion went to, let's not start about, this is not about cost avoidance. This is about business outcomes. The only way to do this is to go product led. If it's product led, that same product led should start thinking value and incur the cost. We had the charge card exercise, the charge card experience. And then Keith stepped in with, okay, how are you making this all possible? It's with the cloud value framework. And I thought it was a framework till Keith started throwing a lot of data, the migration acceleration framework. It's just the pace of innovation, Milan, to your point, is breathtaking. So if I have one lesson to take out of this entire webinar, it would be don't go it alone. So with that, I thank all of you. It's been a pleasure to host this and to chair this. Thanks for the invigorating discussion.
Absolutely. A pleasure to
Thank
be
you
here.
for
Thank you so much.
thanks for
Thank you.
facilitating this,
Thank you.
Sean.
Yeah. Take care. Have a great day. Yeah.
Thank
Bye.
you.